All right, so I just can't help myself but to finish up talking about scope by looking back to the language spec. So here I'm at the language spec, and I said we're going to see how all this works, and I'm just going to show you how it works, and then when we come back it'll make sense to us. So we're going to go through this, and hopefully we'll see, oh yeah, now I totally get this. The scope of a pre-declared identifier is the universe block. What does that mean? So a pre-declared identifier is like, and you know, here's a good place to see it, is just the Golang book. Golang. I feel like that should be something you'd hear in a foreign country. Golang. So here is the scope of a pre-declared identifier is the universe block. That means like types like bool, or like, you know, int, or all these other types, or constants like true, false, iota, or all that stuff, that's all available anywhere in your program, right? So that's what that first line means. The scope of an identifier denoting a constant, so an identifier, like a variable name, so when we have a variable, and if it's like a constant, a type, a variable, a function, but not a method, methods, we'll learn about those in a bit, declared at the top level outside any function is the package block, right? And so we totally saw that. We're talking about package level scope, and here we had like, you know, package level scope, and this was declared outside of any function, right? And so the scope is package level. Cool. So we got that one. And the scope of the package name of an imported package is the file block of the file containing the import declaration. So the scope of a package name of an imported package is the file block of the file containing the import declaration. So what that is saying is, and this is where it's like, you know, the language spec is like, take some meditation, but that's this deal right here, right? So I import fumpt right here, and that's at the file level. It's not accessible at the package level because I'm in the same package, but I can't use fumpt here unless I also import it. So that's what that one is saying right here. The scope of the package name of an imported package is the file block of the file containing the import declaration. The scope of an identifier denoting a method receiver, function parameter, or result variable is the function body. So method receiver, we'll learn about receivers because that's what makes a method, but a function parameter or a result variable, so let's just focus on that because we totally saw that. Function parameter was this one right here, and I think it was when we were talking about closure that I really saw that. And let's look at that one right here. No, that's not it. All right, so here's an example of it. Crazily enough, I found it in variable shadowing and just like opened up everything. I was like, which was it? And here it is. It's right. So this parameter, the scope of that is only the function into which, you know, it's being used. So that's what that says. The scope of an identifier denoting a method receiver, function parameter, or a result variable is the function body. So you know, result variables, don't worry about that because you can name your returns. And we won't be doing that. The scope of a constant or variable identifier declared inside a function begins at the end of the constant spec or var spec, short var declaration for short variable declarations, and ends at the end of the innermost containing block. So again, okay, that would be kind of like hard to understand if we hadn't already seen it in action, but we have seen it in action, and I think it's the order matters one. Here we go. So right here, so the scope of X is right to there. That's it, right? It starts here and it goes to the end. It's not the whole block. So that's what that's saying. And the scope of a type identifier declared inside a function, a type identifier declared inside a function begins at the identifier in the type spec and ends at the end of the innermost containing block. Wait a minute, that's the exact same thing I just described right here. So what is this one? The scope of a constant or variable identifier declared inside a function begins at the end of the const spec or var spec and ends at the end of the innermost containing block. I have no idea what that one means. Hold on. All right, so I was just checking Caleb's you know, explanation of these things, and you know, that's pretty much what we were saying, right? It seems like those are pretty similar. But here to the end is that one, the scope of a constant variable identifier, And then also, this one he says we'll cover it later. And this is a partially written book that's up there, so later's never occurred so far. Anyhow, close enough, right? Like, you can't get it all, but the most important thing is to like keep trying and get as much as you can get, and that's how you gain familiarity with the spec. And there's definitely still even a couple of things in here that I'm not totally certain about, like constant spec or var spec. Short var declaration, I mean, I think I know what that means, but type spec. So those would be things that like I haven't yet owned in terms of like learning exactly what that's referring to. So that'd be something I'd look up. And here's constant declaration, type declaration, but it gets a little bit heady, like I said. The most important thing is being able to use it, and then also trying to push forward in understanding the exact precision of the language specification and the effective Go documentation. So that's the main intent of going through this right here, is seeing that, look, we got most of this, and there's a little bit of uncertainty with these last two, but we know that between those last two is talking a little bit about that, like it's definitely speaking to that for us. And then there's room to grow here with like figuring out what are they referring to with these things, and in the official language of the Go language specification, right? Like, what does that stuff mean? So that's how you kind of grow in a programming language. I don't know. So not the perfect teacher in the fact that I don't have 100% accuracy or perfect knowledge about everything, but hopefully it's the perfection of imperfection, that old Zen thing, right? Where by seeing where the teacher is flawed and seeing that it's cool to be flawed, it's totally okay to be flawed, and that being flawed actually allows you to grow, and being able to admit those flaws helps you go higher, and the process I use when I approach this stuff, hopefully that is the more important lesson. I think it is, which is why I leave it in. So it's like that poem that I read to you earlier. The higher I go, the harder it becomes to admit I don't know. The more I admit I don't know, the higher I go. So it's that old philosophy right there. All right. So that is scope. I feel like we finally nailed it. It was kind of a big topic. I didn't realize it was going to be that big. And you might have noticed, and this is just like a personal anecdote, so you could totally stop this video right now if you're tired of hearing me rambling and you just want to see the code. But the personal anecdote is that I have quite I don't know what you'd call it, humanistic approach to life, right? Like the humanities used to really call me. I studied film when I was young. And so this is just like, at one point in my life, I went through a really hard time. And then I also had a really hard childhood. And I just grew up hard. There's no other way to that's just the way it was, right? There's no other way to describe it. And there was a lot of loss when I was a young kid. So when I was young, I was totally depressed and totally anxious. And young being like, my teens, my 20s. And then I realized I gotta figure out how to get out of this. And I just started writing about it. And I'd make up stories, but I was really kind of telling the story of my life, even if it was in a sort of parable kind of a deal, like just another way of like saying the emotional content of what was going on inside me. So I just wrote a ton, and that humanistic approach was it helped me find my way out of a lot of suffering and a pretty dark place. But anyhow, I just wanted to speak to that humanism because it's more than code. It always is more than code. Half of anything in life is what you know, but the other half is emotional intelligence and who do you know, and do you know yourself, and are you able to get along with people, and what is the full spectrum of life, So I just thought I'd share this because I think it's actually studies show when you study what makes a successful teacher and how do you increase student success, how do you increase retention in a classroom, and having a personal relationship with the students, having community in the classroom totally helps everybody succeed. And so, the main content is coding, but also for all of us to be more successful, we got to know each other as humans. The research supports it. That's just, for some people who are like totally Asperger's, or what's the next level after Asperger's? Not OCD, but autistic, right? Sometimes that's a miss for them. Like they could comprehend it intellectually, but they're more like the Spock type, So but anyhow, and in coding, knowing knowing humanity helps you code things which work well for people. So it's kind of a cool deal. Anyhow, a lot of humanism here, a lot of humanity stuff, right, in all these books.